Welcome to Yelling Into the Void, a podcast discussing and exploring topics in World of Warcraft. I'm Tevin. I'm here with Scott as always, and I do feel like this is a bit of a week of deja vu, Scott.
Why is
It's
that?
a Chiefs-Eagles Super Bowl. Peak and Zaryu got robbed from their Plunderstorm win, and I'm just hopeful that we don't run into deja vu of season 1 into season 2 thing as well. Like that's
No.
what I'm worried about.
It's going to be totally different because the Eagles are going to win this time. And so are the players of World of Warcraft.
So the Eagles are going to win.
Yeah.
So the Eagles win the Super Bowl, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then season 2 will be good. Is this like a Groundhog Day kind of thing? Like if the Chiefs win, season 2 is doomed to be bad?
No, I don't want to say that because I think the Chiefs are probably going to win.
But anyways, yeah, it's kind of wild. If you haven't watched the Creator Clash, it actually was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I caught the last couple games and it was pretty fun to watch.
That's what I think we should remember about the Creator Clash is it is just meant to be fun. Nothing more. Just
there
fun.
is a funny thing about the Creator Clash, though, that I think that they need to look into if they're going to keep doing Plunderstorm tournaments, and that is the scoring system and how they determine a winner is like fucking dog shit.
Yeah, but okay, true. But like, how else do you do it? Like, it's impossible. So if you just go by score, then like in this week's Plunder, this one around would have been decided like game 3. Like,
right.
Everyone would have known who's going to win. So you can't do that and still make like you. So in my mind, you can either be perfectly fair or you can be entertaining. And I mean, as long as as long as they're going to continue to this is essentially a promotional marketing event. They are not inviting the 60 best Plunderstorm players in the world to come compete against each other. They are inviting content creators who will draw eyes to World of Warcraft because that is the intent of the event. So as long as they're doing that, I don't know how else they can score it that's fair and equitable and also still like fun to watch.
That's fair. I think what feels so bad for me is like it feels like you're almost watching the first 90% of it for no reason. And then it's like the last 2 games determine who wins. And that's just how it is. And it could be the last 1 game because the way that they pick the winner is like, if this team in the top 10 wins or whatever, then they win the tournament or whatever it is.
But can I introduce you to a game called basketball? Because that's how that works too.
Yeah, well.
I love basketball, but it does often feel like the first 3 quarters are just like, oh, look, they're playing basketball. And then the last quarter is, okay, now it's time for the game to matter now.
But yeah, all of that to be said, there's a ton going on right now, but not really for the live version of the game. Like there's a lot of stuff going on PTR. There's a lot of builds happening, testing, all of that stuff.
Yes.
Season of Discovery. Phase 7 dropped today? I think.
Can't even keep. I think tomorrow maybe.
Or yeah, tomorrow. Today. Yeah, tomorrow for us. Yesterday for you guys.
Yeah.
Whatever. So that's happening, and that's coming along with another 8-hour maintenance, which not really thrilled about that, but
look, they put a whole new dungeon in there. It takes a long time to build the dungeon.
But yeah, there's a ton going on. So we've already hit on it. Creator Clash changes in the PTR. So not only the raid and Mythic Plus changes and all of that, but there's a lot of classes that are being changed, either minor tweaks or major tweaks or flavor things. So I don't know. I don't really know what to put in the news section for this week, Scott, other than there's shit happening and you just might not know it's happening, but it is still happening.
I mean, I feel like this is just the 4th week in a row of the news section is the show because like we're not playing that much because there's not too much to do in the game right now. So everything that's happening in the game right now is what's happening in future patches, which is news. So yeah.
So before we jump into the main segments that I have down here, there is one thing that I wanted to talk about because it was news to you when I let you know about it.
Uh-huh.
But we are getting a little bit of a sneak peek into player housing in the Undermine, and it's not like actual player housing where you get to like decorate and everything, but they are doing like a really fun like riff on like landlords and stuff like that in this new player apartment and having to pay for rent and everything like that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I thought it was a pretty funny ribbing, and Wowhead came out with this whole article about it that probably got people pissed off because they were reading it and they were like, well, this
Yeah.
is nothing.
Yeah. Look.
But
Okay. Um, this quest line looks very fun. It's a fun little goblin quest line where you're helping some tenants against an abusive landlord. Always for that. And then you get at the end of the quest you get the apartment from the quest. But like I think billing this as a preview for player housing is one of the most absurd things I've ever heard. You can't like there's no customization of the room. You can't place anything down. You can't decorate it any way you want. It's just a phased room that you're in, and there's like a radio that is also an innkeeper, so you can set your Hearthstone there, and that's it. Like it's cool, it's fun, it's neat, but as like a preview for player housing, it is not. I think it's a preview for player housing in just that it's winking at the players and being like, we know we've told you this thing is coming. You know we've told you this thing is coming. Here's us laying the not even systemic groundwork, but just like we're just winking at you. Like that's all it is. And that's fine. But yeah, the Wowhead article, slow news day, right? Because it's like a preview of player housing. Well, first time ever. It's like, no. No.
no, I think what it is it's the devs telling us that we need to be like the majority of the people in the world, where we have to be renters before we can own our own house, you know?
I think that the one thing it did, and the one thing the Wowhead article said, which is something I think you and I agreed on when we were first talking about player housing, was this idea that it will most likely be a quest reward at the end of a quest chain that you will be given your plot of land and house and whatever, which I think we just agreed was generally true because they're not going to paywall a system. They're not that bad. Now, will I think there will be alternate houses
Yeah.
that would cost money? Yeah, of course. Yeah. But like everyone will get a base template house. I mean, we still don't know like how this is going to work. Like if it's going to be like fun. We don't know anything. We don't know what game like they're going to copy from with the system. We just don't know. So, I mean, fun quest line. I'm glad it seems like they're really cooking in this goblin stuff. But yeah, not a preview of player housing.
I just read the article. I thought it was pretty funny, and I sent it Scott's way when he was out of town, and he was like, "They did what?"
I was
And then,
my anniversary trip, and in the middle of dinner, I had to pull out my phone and read this because I thought it was important. And now I'm divorced, so thank you for that.
yeah. Nobody's believing you right now. But main segment for today's show, Scott. I guess let's talk about retail as it is right now.
Sure.
And I don't maybe we extend this to like just the live versions of the game as they are right now. So just to quickly hit on like Hardcore Classic is still going pretty well, pretty strong. Season of Discovery, from what I've been able to understand, the people who have been keeping up with Season of Discovery and everything are very excited about this new dungeon. And even people looking from the outside in seem to be very excited, which I think is a good thing because I think Season of Discovery hit its high in season one and then has been a steady decline, and then they've been picking it back up here at the end. So I think that's a good thing.
Yeah,
And
sure.
then, do we even talk about like normal classic at this point? Like, it's happening. In vanilla classic is what I'm saying. The anniversary servers that aren't hardcore, they're happening. People are still playing. I think there's a decent amount of the player base on there. But
Yeah.
the same thing that's happened to the vanilla servers in the past is going to happen. You're going to hit the end. You're going to get bis, and then there's going to be no more content to do. Like vanilla is finite. That's the problem with it.
Well, but it's going to TBC, so there's a longer road slightly for that. So,
Sure.
but yeah,
Um, and then the only other thing to talk about is Kata, and I think that testing for Dragon Soul just started on the Cataclysm PTR,
correct. They've also
or
announced
is
that they're going to be
starting.
ending the PvP season um, on the 10th of February. So
Hmm.
presumably that's coming pretty quick.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, this really crazy thing happened where Deathwing came and destroyed the world, and so nobody plays the game anymore. The world is destroyed, unfortunately. I have it's this weird thing where I think there's a perception out there that like everyone is either playing retail or they're playing classic in on the anniversary servers, or some people are playing SOD, and there's this perception out there that like Kata is dead. Um, and I don't know if that's true. I think what it is it's just like the people that are playing it are continuing to play it. There's not a lot of news about it because there's no like there's no updates to like what it's just the game as it was released with some tweaks in it. Like there's
yeah.
nothing to update about, there's nothing to talk about, there's not really any balancing or hot fixing or anything they need to do. The game's just kind of running. Is it probably hugely popular? No. But I mean, I think it's there's people playing it. You see posts that pop up every once in a while on Reddit and other places. They're like, "Kata's dead," and then people are like, "No, I raid every week, and I'm enjoying it." So yeah, I think it's just like no news is perceived as dead game when no one's
Yeah.
talking about it. But yeah, whatever. I think they're happy with things the way they are, I guess.
The other part of Kata that I like, I think it's hilarious, right? Because like, if you ask a majority of the player base, like when the downfall of WoW started, like people will point to Cataclysm pretty
Mm-hmm.
regularly, and I think it's kind of funny that it's happening again, but for what I'm going to call entirely different reasons. Like, Kata is almost dying because we have such an overload of ways to play this fucking game right now
Yeah.
that, like, we don't, people don't have to pick between retail and classic. They can pick between retail and vanilla anniversary servers, or retail and hardcore, or SOD. And then there's Cataclysm. Like, there's just so many ways to play the game right now. And I think that that's really what's probably hurting classic
Yeah,
Cataclysm.
and we talked about this, and like the closer we get expansion wise to live retail, the closer the game just becomes like
Retail.
just a worse version of retail. I don't play classic, vanilla, any of that stuff. I don't. But I totally understand the appeal because it is a different game. It is designed different. Like the goal, the pace, the what you do in the game, how you interact with the game is totally different. It's much closer to the traditional MMO style that I kind of grew up playing. So I totally get why that it would be appealing to someone. But as the game advanced, it moved further and further away from that, arguably out of necessity. And it just became more and more like what the game is now. And so yeah, I think at Kata you've reached this kind of demarcation point where like I enjoyed my time with y'all. Like we played Kata, we played the first season, we had fun raiding, I enjoyed it. But it is just kind of a worse version of retail. Um,
Yeah.
and so it's like, if I'm gonna be playing this, like every once in a while, I still think of logging in a Kata and just like gearing up my character. And then I'm always like, well, I'm gonna do that. Why don't I just like run some Mythic Plus on an alt or something? And that's what I end up
Mhm.
doing. And it's there's nothing wrong with that. That's like why the game has evolved. But yeah, it's like I really think this cyclical, we're gonna release a new expansion every year or so thing is gonna work in a very specific way. It's gonna, oh, people are nostalgic for this expansion. It's exactly what I was with Kata. People are nostalgic for this expansion. They're going, oh, I want to relive that expansion. They're gonna go in there, they're gonna do it, and then they're gonna be like, neat, I'm done now. And they're just gonna move on. And so like that is just the cycle of this iteration of the game is just gonna take that. Whereas things like hardcore are more have more staying power. Things like vanilla, true vanilla, people like that specific style. It's just different, and
Yeah.
it's fine. It's fine.
Well, that brings us to retail, the game that you and I tend to call home, though. I did take a little vacation to hardcore there for a little bit,
You
and
logged
still log
in.
in every now and again.
You logged onto retail the other day. You did it. You
I
were
did.
in
I
that
did.
game. I
I
couldn't believe
got
it.
I got not one but two rings to 658 item level.
Wow.
Two.
Wow.
But so here's my problem with retail right now. So this is the reason I added it to the show, is because I logged in, I got my ring, I did all of the stuff that I wanted to do in the Siren Isles, and I got my catch-up gear from the Siren Isles, and I was like, cool, I want to run keys. I want to run keys. And you know what happened? I found my healer friend. I found a couple of other DPS buddies. And then we couldn't find a fucking tank to save our lives. And
Uh-huh.
like, this is the ultimate problem that I always have in fucking retail, is like, if you don't have a 5-man group and you're looking for anything that isn't a DPS, sometimes you just have to sit there and wait for like 30 minutes to find somebody who isn't even qualified to do the dungeon that you're doing. And then it feels like shit. And I don't know. I got a problem with that.
Yeah, I mean, so I think what's happened is, so obviously, like, there's a tank shortage. There's been a tank shortage. There was a tank shortage throughout the entire season. But I also think here late in the season, like, everyone that normally plays tanks or would try to play tank or interested in playing tank is doing something else now. Either they're not playing the game whatsoever, or they're doing exactly what I did, which is I dipped my toe in the tank pool and I said that water is tepid and awful, and I ran back to my nice comfy healing hot tub, and that's where I'm living again. This is a problem, and like, look, you know, I haven't played any of the new dungeons on the PTR yet. From what I'm seeing in the patch notes, they are working towards addressing the problem with tanking and the amount of tank busters like that are going out there, and the amount of abuse and damage tanks are taking just from trash mobs. I think their stated design goal is they're going to move tank busting abilities, hard hitting tank abilities, to be more specific to boss encounters and mini boss encounters, and that just regular trash will not have these frequently ridiculously hard hitting tank abilities, which is good. But I think that still only addresses one small part of the problem that people have with tanks, which is it's an incredibly, even more so than healer, incredibly high pressure role that is very easy to make one mistake on and screw up and destroy the whole key, everything. They have not walked back any of the changes they made to tanks going into this expansion, and I think
Yep.
I think everyone has kind of collectively agreed that was a bad call. Like, I'm not saying tanks need to be indestructible, certainly not, but I think the game that tanks got to play was a game of self-sustainability and self-survival. They didn't have to worry about anyone else. They could focus their gameplay, and their skill expression was on how many packs they could handle. And that's not really how it's turned out. Like I said, that it was very frustrating for me. It's very easy to make a mistake. It's very difficult. Like the cooldown, like just you have to, the way gosh, why can't I think of the way active mitigation works is like it takes time to build up, but you don't get any of that on pull, right? Like, and that's why you have to burn an external CD on pull, or you're going to die, because you need time to get your tank engine running. It's just not fun. It's just not fun. It's frustrating. I can't believe I picked the worst fucking season ever to try tanking. I don't know how I managed to pull that off. So I do think this is why people aren't playing tank, and this is something they need. They need this season. I don't know. We'll see what the numbers look like at the end of season 2 with the specific changes to the dungeons. But I really do think this is a problem they need to address here, because there's all these keys that are bottlenecked by tanks. Like if you look in LFG from a level 2 key to a level 10 key, which is where the majority of the people engage with the system, you'll see a group of a healer and 3 DPS, and you'll just see dozens of those groups, dozens.
Mm-hmm.
And like a tank, if a tank pops up, they're instantly gone because they've applied to 5 groups, and just whoever's fastest on the accept button is the one that gets the tank. It's a real problem for sure.
The other part of this, though, is like, it isn't even the tank and healer shortage, but that I think veteran players like yourself and I, will recognize we're in a lull period. They'll go play other games. They've been here. They've done this. They go do other things and then they come back when the new season starts. So right now, a lot of the player base who is still sticking around are either people who uh, literally only play World of Warcraft.
Yeah.
Like that is like their main and only game, or are people who are new and learning. People who haven't really had the experience to like, okay, we're in this lull period. Let's go play something else now. So that makes it even more frustrating for when you're doing things like, you know, you're getting into the 7, 8, 9, 10 levels of keys and you have somebody who still doesn't know the dungeons. It gets a lot more frustrating.
It's rough out
And
there,
this
man.
is it's something that I experienced firsthand coming back a couple days ago. Um, and it was very hard for me to not get frustrated at the person outwardly, other than saying, interesting.
I said, "What you doing?"
so that's the current state of Mythic
Yeah.
Plus. I want to keep playing Mythic Plus, but from what it's looking like right now, I really had it set in my mind that I was going to play Hunter and not look back in season 2. But if we're going to have a tank issue, I don't know, man. I might look at tanking since they're making all these changes, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah. I
So
mean, it's going to be interesting. Like we'll see what the numbers recovery on season 2 is. Obviously, there's going to be a bunch of people that come back to the game. That's how these cyclical games work. I do think, like, do you remember 2 short expansions ago where Horde and Alliance couldn't play together? Can you imagine how hard it would be to find a group right now if we were still segmented on faction lines? Holy
yeah.
shit! Wow.
Well, luckily, we don't have to worry about that world because we can play with the enemy, the Horde players.
Yeah.
So.
Oh my god. Yeah. I mean, like, look, the game is in a lull period right now. Everyone can see it. We can see it. I think people's interest in the game is in a low period right now. We can also see that in our numbers of downloads. People are not as concerned with the game, which is fine. It's programmed into that. But yeah, I think the consequences, um, any kind of shortage is exacerbated by exactly what you saw. It's hard to get in keys. Um, it's hard to participate in the system right now, and that's kind of a bummer
Mhm.
because yeah, I've been wanting to play some Mythic Plus. Like I've actually like my monk has been having a very hard time getting into tens for some reason. I don't know. Like my gear is good, my score is fine, and it's like I've like plus 3 tens on my monk, and yet like I will get decline after decline, and I'm like I'm a healer. This isn't supposed to happen to me.
It's all right. I'll gear up my tank and we'll do tens together before the end of the season.
Great, that's perfect. Love it.
so that's like the negative side of things. I want to focus kind of on a positive thing that I noticed, and that's how easy gearing is right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's kind of crazy easy
Yeah.
to get to a point at which you can like start engaging with the end game systems. So like you can get your ring now. So this is as of last Tuesday. You can get your ring and then you can go get all of your stones in a matter of an hour, maybe.
Yeah.
And then you can get your ring upgraded all the way to the maximum item level in that same amount of time. So, like, getting a 658 item level ring that fast with the stones you need is extremely amazing. And then on the way of doing all of that, you're getting currency that you can then buy. What is it? It's like 584 gear or
Yeah.
something with
Mm-hmm.
that can then be upgraded. So you're getting all of this stuff. Like you're getting the currency to buy the catch-up gear, you're getting the crest to then go upgrade that catch-up gear, and you're getting the ring. So like, is it perfect? No, you still have a shortage of crests. Is it high enough item level? In my opinion, no, I think it should probably at least be like 600 base, but it doesn't really matter because you're getting the ability to get items that you can catalyze that you have 8 catalyst charges of now. And it's just, I think that there's a lot more good to this system. And the nitpicks that I have about it are just that, nitpicks.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, I took my freshly leveled priest that I just hit 80 on and then shelved. And I went to the island, not too long later, was 90 something, close to 600, and I was hopping into keys and doing up to like fives or sixes in it what felt like a couple hours. So
Mhm.
it's very quick, it's very good. I still think, we've talked about that damn Crest Mountain, that still is pretty pretty overwhelming when you think about it, but yeah, to at least get into where you're engaging with the system feels very, very quick and easy. I didn't do
Mhm.
any delves on my priest. Fuck delves. I'm not doing any delves unless I absolutely have to. Just gonna skip that part. And I think it's working very well. So I don't know if you noticed this. You didn't, because they fixed it. So when the final week of the ring upgrades came out last week, there was a short time there where the flying ability that you unlock wasn't account wide. So like
Ooh.
when you finish the ring quest, when you get the final upgrade for the ring, you also unlock flying on the island. And so I did flying. I was like, I'll take my priest here now. I have flying, and I'll just be able to zip around really quick and do all the quests really quickly to get my ring. And lo and behold, I could not do that. They fixed it relatively quickly, but I was already writing down my notes for the things I was going to complain about on this episode. But yeah,
So
it's pretty easy. I kind of just I don't know. Maybe this is like, give a mouse a cookie, but like I just feel like, why should I have to redo the quests to level the ring on my alts at all? Like, why should I actually have to do that? Like, I mean, yes, they're really quick, they're very easy, but like if you're gonna make it so quick and easy that it only takes me 45 minutes to an hour to do it, can't you just like just like give it to me? Like I don't know. It's just, I don't know.
so there's definitely problems with this system, and there's uh, something that annoyed me to no end with this system isn't even something that is this system. Uh, the warband currency, dude. Like, I love that we can share currency between our account. I do.
Hmm.
Like, that's a nice thing. But dear Lord, is it so fucking annoying that the only way for you to get the currency is to pull it off of another character. You can't push it to a character. And even on top of that, it isn't just like an account pool. Like, I wish that it wasn't tied to a specific character, and on every character I had access to the same amount of currency. And if I spent it on one, then that reduces it for everybody, yada, yada, yada. And so, like, I think a lot of my frustration with the system actually came from the way that warband currencies have been implemented, more so rather than the way the ring has been implemented. The
Yeah.
only annoyance I had with the ring specifically was trying to get the very like specific stones I needed on my alt, because the way you have to do it is you buy them on your main and then you mail them to your alt, rather than just your alt unlocking the vendor to buy the shit that they. I don't know. That's also a kind of weird way to do it, in my opinion. But again, like I said earlier, that's just a nitpick of the system. It's not saying it's shit. But the
Yeah.
warband currencies, like, it's confusing to me how like it's all working. I don't know.
I agree. I think this is probably the biggest argument for WoW too, is just like the reason the currencies are this way is because they've had to kind of jerry rig the systems onto the systems that already exist. Like they've done very, very clever like design and like architecture and engineering issues to like make the game written on this incredibly old code do these different things that they've had to rewrite and refigure out so much of the stuff. But like the fundamental flaw is at the heart of like the base level of this game just not being built to do any of the things they're doing now. And so like it's always going to kind of be a little bit clunky. I mean, that was like when we the trading, so when we complained about like trading the cosmic flux and like all the shit back in Shadowlands, like part of that was just simply that it was just like they hadn't figured out a way to allow the system to just trade amongst characters without having to like go to a vendor, buy something, and then trade it to it. Like they just hadn't figured it out, and they've kind of sort of figured it out now, but it's still kind of clunky and clumsy. And yeah, I mean, like I'm not saying we need WoW 2.0 or anything. Like we need like a full like ground up refresh of the game, but like this is, I think the stuff you're complaining about is just a consequence of the game coming out in 2004.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not something that they might not be able to solve at some point.
Yeah, maybe
They might.
they'll
They've impressed
figure it
me
out.
before. So
Yeah, they're certainly doing things every day that the game was not designed or intended to do. So they're figuring stuff out. But yeah, there's a lot of clunkiness on like the internal logic of some of that stuff.
but all right, Scott, I don't have anything else about retail or the current versions of the game that I want to call out.
I just want to once again reiterate the annoyance of, like, especially for alts, that once you've gotten like 626 on all your gear. So once you've got your heroic track items all leveled up, which can happen very, very quickly now on alts, it's like the game is now craft pieces or wait once per week to get a myth track item. And like on a character that from the very beginning of the season has been running dungeons every week and getting a vault every week, like that is not as bad because you would just kind of naturally over time fill out your myth track items. But on like an alt character that like just started doing tens this week, let's say, it's like, it's just, you're never going to feel like you're fully geared. I think there's a flaw in how we do this system. Like I was listening to some other podcasts talk about just getting rid of myth track gear altogether, just like fucking getting rid of it. Like there's a part of me that's like, yeah, let's just do it. Let's just get rid of it. Let's like make mythic just cosmetics only. That's fine with me. Let's do it. That's where I am right now. And I'll probably change my mind about that in 5 minutes, but it does feel weird. Like my monk's at a point where I'm basically done gearing. Except for like, I don't really want to just do 8 keys just to play the vault game every week on an alt. And so it's kind of a downer. Like I want to play the game, I want to enjoy the game, and I have fun running keys, but like I also want to feel like I'm advancing, and you just not.
So I will say I'm not opposed to the highest level of difficulty only giving cosmetic rewards.
Yeah, it works in Final
I
Fantasy. I, like,
yeah.
like the idea that the argument here is that, oh, that will kill mythic rating. Like if people aren't getting reward, this is such a rewards driven game that no one will do it anymore. And I'm going to be honest with you, not many people do mythic rating right now. And I think everyone that does mythic rating right now will probably keep doing it because they're just like people that really love this game and love doing the hard. Like I really feel, I think there's this perception out there, and maybe it's true, but I really feel like the people that are doing mythic rating are not doing it for the gear, because I think it's so challenging, it's so time consuming, and you have to have so much patience to get through 500 pull bosses that, like, if you're just doing it for what it could drop, I just don't believe that's the primary motivating factor for those people.
Well, the other part of that too is like even if you are doing it just for the gear, then I I don't know. Like if you get it, then what? You just
Yeah.
stop rating? Like you're just done?
Yeah.
I don't know. That seems like a weird argument. I like the thought of doing cosmetics, and hell, they could even do it as like boss drops, like it
Yeah.
is now. So essentially, it's random
Yeah.
on if you get stuff or not.
And like make
Whatever.
them cool as shit, right? Like, yeah, make them
Yeah.
like badass fucking weapons, awesome mounts, awesome gear that like those people are standing in town and you know, oh, that's a CE raider. Like I'm totally fine with that. Like make them exclusive and stuff that I will probably never get and never get to wear. I am completely fine with that. I am less fine with if you're a Mythic Plus player, your only avenue for Myth Track gear is a dice roll once a week. I don't like that system.
So I just thought this up in the 5 minutes we've been talking about this. So this might be a terrible idea, and feel free to tell me that.
Okay.
But what happens if we get rid of Mythtrack gear, but instead we add those upgrades to Hero Track? Keep it having to be Myth crests. So like rather than you have to get the piece of gear and then upgrade it, you get the piece of gear at Heroic, and then you can upgrade it to the Mythic item level with the Mythic crests. That
So
way you
then,
don't have to like roll to get the item again.
so hero gear would be just like 12 out of 12 instead of 6 out of 6 max
Yeah.
upgrade.
But you would only get to like 6 out of 12 if you were hero. Well, I guess it'd be 8 out of 12 or whatever.
Yeah. Maybe.
I guess I'd feel bad because then people will be like, I never get to complete my gear.
Yeah. I mean, I think I struggle with this so much. So I mean, I think that's an interesting solution that could work. I don't know. I, I think they just need to retool how gearing works amongst these different, because like there's a part of me that's sitting here thinking, and I almost said it as a right then, which would just have literally contradicted what the point I just made, which is I'm fine with the hardest stuff in the game giving the best stuff in the game, which I just contradicted myself, right? But like the problem is you have these different paths of endgame that are so different from each other. Like I am completely fine with like someone in the mythic raids having gear that I can't get. The problem is there's nothing in my like track of playing that I can get that the people that want a mythic raid can't get, you know? So it's
Mhm.
like we both share the same upgrade track. Like we both the game takes place in the same world where we have the same gear and we want to get the gear to the same item level, whether you're doing mythic plus or you're doing raid, you want it at that top item level. Um, and yet one of them is is barred from getting the gear except for on like this very slow random once per week idea, and the other can kill 8 bosses every week and get a shot at multiple pieces of gear. I mean, they won't always get them, like, and maybe the argument is that those over time like even out, but I don't think they do actually, because even on the three chances at myth track items you're trying to get in the vault, like you're still rolling the dice on on if it's going to be useful or not, like like there's so much RNG in there that
Well, and Mythic Raiders are essentially getting to roll twice. They get to
yeah.
kill a boss, and then they get a second shot at
Yeah,
their
no,
myth
that's true.
table.
That's true. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like, I think the problem is again we have this one progression system with gear and item level that all pillars of the game are using, and yet we lock parts of those levels behind only certain pillars. And I don't know. I don't know how to fix that. I'm not a game designer, but I think that is a problem.
Yeah, I mean the only way to fix it if you don't want to get rid of Mythtrack, I think, is to give end of dungeon Mythtrack gear at some keystone level.
Yeah.
Like, other than that, I don't know how you fix the problem really.
I I think just get rid of myth track, man. Like when they originally designed the system, they didn't have a myth track, and everyone was fine with it.
That's true. That's true. And it allows you to do cosmetic rewards for Mythic, and it even allows you to do cosmetic rewards for Mythic Plus, but that's more art design time too. So
Speaking as myself, who has not done a single boss on Mythic ever, um, I would want to do Mythic just for cosmetic rewards. Because the thing that actually interests me about Mythic rating and the reason I kind of want to get into it is just the challenge and the encounters and the working together with people to overcome a very difficult challenge. Like that's what I want. And yeah, like having cool cosmetics and things that make you stand out to your peers is a cool thing to get from that. So
and you get to keep them forever in this
yeah,
game because
true.
transmog's a thing.
Yeah, it's
So
almost
no, I
it's a
agree.
better reward than just a piece of gear you're gonna chuck in the fucking trash in 6 months. Yeah.
I completely agree. But all of that, uh, we'll see what happens. I don't see them getting rid of Mythtrack anytime soon, but I've been surprised before, so I guess we'll see.
I don't know. I think something with Mythic Raid has to change, and whether it's going to be something like that or just 10-man Mythic or something, I feel like maybe this is a bold and specific prediction time. I feel like in Midnight we are going to see some large change to Raid along those lines, because I really do feel like Mythic Raid is in a not great spot right now. I think I was listening to another podcast talking about how they've really leaned into catering to making the race good and fun.
Mhm.
And the consequence is it's killing a lot of guilds. And there's a lot of people jumping out of the mythic raid scene. Um,
Yeah.
so I don't
Well,
know.
Do you want to take a bit of a happier look at raids? You want to talk
Yeah.
about the new raid coming up?
I mean, this raid looks fucking awesome, which is why I want raid to have a healthy environment where people enjoy playing and a portion of it is not dying a slow death, because they are designing very good raids. And this raid looks fucking sweet.
So first off, first impressions. I guess the very first thing that I'm going to say is we're going to talk about these bosses that were tested in the order at which they were tested, not the order at which you are going to encounter them. So
Which is
just
confusing.
be forewarned there. I call me a shitty podcaster, but I couldn't be bothered to order the bosses in the order at which we were going to fight them. So I just did it in the order at which Dratnos released videos about them. But anyways, there are a ton of good things in this raid, and like we've talked about the swirlies, and like it sounds so stupid to like harp on this because all it is it's a graphic on the ground that denotes like where damage is going to be, but it is so much better than it was. And like that, in combination with the theme of the raid, in combination with the mechanics of these bosses, I think there's a lot of good going on in this raid. And if you want more in-depth details on any of the fights that we're going to be talking about, or mythic, a look into the actual mythic stuff, check out Dratnus's videos. He's already got a playlist up for all of the testing for 11.1. So definitely go check him out.
Yeah.
But
he is doing the best work, like consistently over the past few seasons. Like when it comes to testing, like he's doing the best work at like quickly compiling a video that just walks through the basics of the fight based on testing. I'm pretty impressed. Like I'm generally impressed with Dratnos overall, but like when raid testing starts, I just look for the Dratnos videos now.
mm-hmm. So to dive in, Scott, and like I said, it's stupid to harp on this, but the first thing we have to talk about is these fucking new swirlies. Like, it's the mechanics the boss is putting on the ground have a new animation. There's a new animation for mechanics around players, and there's a new animation for like things that they put on the ground that you have to go then explode. There's very defined borders to all three of these things. And as long as the damage lines up with those defined borders, I think that as stupid as this might be one of the best changes they have made in the last two expansions, maybe even.
Yeah.
It's huge.
The swirly is bad, and the new swirly is good. And that's all there is to say about that.
I kept watching the videos from Dratnos, and I was like, oh my god, you can actually see where shit is happening.
Yeah.
Like you can actually see it.
Yeah.
So, but to jump in, the first boss that he goes over is Sprocket Master Lockenstock.
I love these names. I love these names.
Dude, this fight, Scott, I know you didn't play Warlords of Draenor, but there was a fight in Blackrock Foundry called Hans and Franz. And essentially there were these four conveyor belts that were all moving the entire fight. And there were like machinery mechanics that would happen during this while your raid's being moved along these belts. And then the bosses would do their own mechanics and everything. And dude, this fight just gives me like nostalgia for the Hans and Franz fight in Blackrock Foundry.
It also reminds me of that one fight in Siege of Agramar where some people had to like go up a
Siege
pipe
Master?
and hop onto the conveyor belt. Yeah.
Siege Master Blackhorn or whatever it is. Yeah. I really like this fight. I like it. It looks like it's absolutely fucking chaos.
It looks hectic as fuck. Yeah. It looks nuts.
It's in the best way. They do it in the best way possible. Like it starts out slow, one mechanic at a time, easy for you to understand. And then it picks up, and it just picks up exponentially the longer the fight goes on. And I will say something you will see in a lot of the fights that we're going to talk about is they are really leaning into this, like the fight gets harder over time thing, which is normal for raids, but like even more so, like it almost feels like almost every boss has like a ramping in rage at which you need to be.
Yeah.
Rather than like okay, well, you fought the boss for 8 minutes, now you're just going to die. It's more of like you're taking increased damage the longer the fight goes on, or you're getting bombarded with more and more and more and more mechanics the longer the fight goes on type
Yeah.
of enrages. So
I think
I
that
think
is just
that's a good thing.
universally more fun, and it creates first kill moments that are like always kind of the room slowly filling with fire. We running out of room. We're running out of time. Like the mechanics are over. Like it's the most fun way to do a first kill, rather than just like, oh, are we gonna get it in 7 minutes and 59 seconds? Because at 8 minutes we all die. Yeah, it's just that's not as fun.
So I will say that this fight looks like it has the potential to have a lot of fucking jank happening, which is my one main concern with it, because there is just so much going on and players are being forced, to move along these conveyor belts during an intermission.
Yeah.
And there's an intermission. I don't think it's in invulnerability though, so. That's another thing that they didn't really do this time around is there isn't very many like actual invulnerability phases on these bosses.
Yeah, because everyone
There is
hates those.
there is at least one. I think Rick Reverb has one. But yeah, ultimately, all I'm trying to say is there isn't a ton to talk about on this fight because there is just so much shit happening. Like there's lines that happen that then grow the longer the fight goes on. There's void areas that you can't stand in. There's conveyor belts pushing you and pulling you whenever you're having to run and interrupt the boss during the intermission. And there's shit you have to soak, and you have to soak it smartly because there's a debuff that goes on the rest of the raid. I don't know. All in all I really have to say about this is it gives me Hans and Franz vibes, and it looks awesome. I don't know if there's more you want to go into detail on this, though.
No, I don't
Scott.
think so. I mean, I think this is boss 5 or 4 in the raid, so it's one of the mid-level bosses, and it seems like that's a fair amount of chaos for kind of moving into the latter half of the raid. So no, I'm liking this a lot. Like I don't have that Hans and Franz experience, obviously, but this looks really cool.
Mm-hmm. Well, then the next boss he released a video for is Styx Buck Junker, which the thing that stood out to me is the like staple mechanic of this fight. You get to roll a junk ball and like pick up ads and pick up little pools of junk on the ground, and then ultimately you get to be the big junk ball, and then you roll over the big bomb so that it doesn't blow up and kill your raid, and everybody else who has balls at the same time can roll them into the boss to deal damage. It's a cool way to emphasize not only designating one person to do this mechanic, but everybody do the mechanic, roll the ball into the boss, you get some extra damage. And it's like, at least during testing, it wasn't an insignificant amount of damage. It was a fairly decent, like, I think it was like 1.5% per ball or something like that they rolled into the boss. So
yeah,
I think it's a cool mechanic, and I think it's interesting. I'm a little concerned that the tuning could be if you miss a ball, then you die kind of thing. But that's something they'll figure out, and I'm not worried that that's going to come into live and be an absolute nightmare for an extended period of time. I think if it's a problem, they'll fix it pretty quick.
I think that's definitely going to be the tuning in Mythic, but I think it's okay for that to be the tuning in Mythic. So yeah, I mean, the concern in my mind is how tightly that is for Heroic. Can you survive missing one bomb? Like what's the damage check type stuff? I agree. Like this is Katamari Damacy, that game where you just roll up the universe and it's fun. I'm always like you can call them gimmick fights, I guess. But I'm always into these things that try to do something different than just your kind of typical like you go into a room and tanks tank and healers heal and DPS. Like they try to mix things up and do fun things. So I'm a pretty big fan of this one. It looks cool.
I also like this mechanic because everyone in the raid gets it. Like the tanks aren't exempt from this.
Yeah.
A lot of mechanics that are fun for players, tanks are exempt from, and then the tanks are bored. So like I like that they get to actually do a mechanic here. Yes. I don't know if tank players are going to come at me for that, but I think it's cool.
I tanked in the last raid, and I can tell you that we don't have anything to do. Like 90% of the time, we don't do anything. Like when I switched from tank to healer and went into my first raid, I was like, "Oh, what do I do with this? I've never had to deal with this. What do I do?"
This is another boss though that has a damage increasing mechanic. It has a timed cast, just like the first. Like on every so many minutes, they will do. The first boss did an intermission that you had to go fight her. And this boss does in just a cast
Hmm.
that will then increase their damage for the remainder of the fight. So yeah, I think it's cool. It's an interesting idea. I think that they did well on this one. Um, and I don't have a ton else to add. I'm not trying to do like a deep dive into each one of these bosses. I just want
Yeah,
to
well,
go
we
over
haven't
like
actually
main
played them yet,
mechanics.
right? So like
Yeah.
we've just watched someone talk about them.
So then that brings us to the one-armed bandit. And I love the fucking name of this boss, just first off.
It's a slot
And
machine.
this fight, I think, is of all of the ones that I've seen, I think that I am the most excited for this fight and then the Cauldron of Carnage, which we'll talk about later. I think those are the two fights that I'm like, okay, this is actually fucking awesome.
Mhm.
So, one of the main mechanics in this fight is it targets players with this line, which then rolls coins at them. And if you get hit by the coins, you get stunned, you take a bunch of damage. But if you narrowly dodge the coins, you get a buff which increases the damage you deal. So you're rewarded for playing on the edge, which is just awesome in a gambling kind of themed boss. I don't know. I think it's just it fits the theme perfectly
Mhm.
and I love it. And then on the flip side of this, you have to then roll the coins again. So you can choose to roll them back through the raid to give your raid an extension on their buff if you want.
Mhm.
So there's choice in that as well. There's also choice later in the fight for like the main mechanics. But Scott, I wanted to get your thoughts on how you feel about this whole coin thing. I
I think
think
it's
it's
so
awesome.
cool. I think it's so cool because like one cool thing you're gonna see with that is like if the damage check on this is really hard in Mythic, then you're gonna like essentially need to farm as much damage out of these coins as possible. So you are going to have to roll them back through the raid. So like I'm just imagining seeing these incredibly skilled, incredibly coordinated teams like just expertly knowing exactly how to roll these coins and soak the damage thing. It's so cool. Like the whole like every part of this fight is the best. Like that coin thing, just the idea that you have to play the slot machine throughout the fight. You like there are ads that spawn and they drop a token that you need to put in the slot machine, and you have to mix and match the tokens for different effects, and you can't do the same one twice. So you're constantly having to like plan out. We have to do like fire and electricity on this one. We have to do bomb and fire because we haven't done that. And I mean, like boringly, like the best most efficient path is going to be discovered pretty soon, and then that's just the way everyone's going to do it. But it's still just a cool idea,
Mhm.
and it's a very fun looking, like this is what I mean by you can tell they were just having fun with this design. Is like once they're like, all right, it's going to be goblin and then it's going to be a casino. What do we do with a casino? What bosses can we have in a casino? So someone's like, what about a slot machine? And then, and then everything just kind of rolls out from there.
Quite
It looks
literally.
so fun. Yeah.
I will say the visual design of this fight, there is one thing that I really like about it, and it's that you at the front of the room, like behind where the boss spawns, you can see the combinations at which you have already done on the slot machine because you can't repeat a combination of the tokens that you get. And so they do a very good job of showing with like flavor the things that you've already done. So you're not forced to remember what you've already done. You're not going to be forced to get an add-on, though a lot of people probably will, to remember what you've already done. Um, and so I think that that's a very cool way to go about it. That is something that I feel like Final Fantasy does very well. Is it does a lot of this like atmospheric information giving
Hmm.
that WoW has never really done super well. And I think that this is very cool to see them playing around with. And I think that it works pretty well in this fight, at least watching it from Tratnos's perspective.
Yeah, I agree. This fight looks great. I can't wait.
So that brings us to the first boss I'm a little concerned about. So there is a boss called Mugsy, which if you played in Legion and you did the like trio fight with the moon and the light and dark phases and everything, kind of has that kind of vibes. But all I took away from this fight is it looks hard and kind of annoying. Like, I'm concerned about this fight, and I'm a little bit concerned about the Rick Reverb fight. And I don't know if it's just because Dratnos was saying like things are a little overtuned on Muggsy health wise, and also they were struggling with one of the main mechanics. So I think this one will probably get tested more. They might go back to the drawing board a little bit on this one. But my
Yeah.
takeaway, at least from the initial testing, is um, it looks a little hard, and I'm hopeful that they do something with this one.
So this is the penultimate boss in the raid. And so, I mean, it's okay if it's hard, but it looks hard. Like, so first of all, I think for anyone that did Echo of Neltharion, like seeing the walls from that mechanic in another penultimate boss is probably giving you PTSD. But yeah, so they brought back the wall mechanic. You're gonna have to break the wall specifically using certain abilities to get, I think, into, because I think there's basically, I think he spawns two on one side of the room. He spawns two ads, summons walls around them. You need to use certain abilities to break the walls to get in to kill the ad or to stop the ad from casting. It does look very complicated, and I am a little worried about it as well.
The other thing with those cages, you have to soak them. So you at least trap one player if it's a one player soak in with those ads.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
if you don't break them out in time, they will kill them.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that too. Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of moving parts here. It sounds like there's one shots for if you mess up this like line mechanic that you use to break the prisons.
Mm-hmm.
Which in a raid of 20 people on Mythic, if there's still only 2 prisons, I can only imagine that that is going to become annoying very quickly. But yeah, I'll be interested to see the iterations they make on this boss, because at the very best, or at the very worst, they're going to have to do some tuning numbers. And at the very best, they're going to revisit maybe how so there's bombs that spawn on one of the sides of the room, and they fixate towards players.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm
and
not a
that's
fan of
the
that
mechanic that was
mechanic.
kind of broken, because you're supposed to blow them up with some other mechanics that you can do, but then they spawn swirlies, which means you have to have people go soak them, but you're still being fixated by a bunch of things, and it deals a fuck ton of damage. And if you miss a swirly, you essentially wipe. So it just seems like very overly complex for what they're trying to achieve. I
Yeah.
think it's already complex enough that you have to take one mechanic to blow up these bombs that are already chasing you and forcing you to move around the entire raid.
Mm-hmm.
I think the swirlies might be a little too much. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see. I think we can all agree though, Muggsy Heads of Security is just the best name ever.
I Scott, I'm very excited for this next boss, and it's
Okay.
so stupid because it's the first boss in the raid.
Uh-huh.
But Vexy and the Gear Grinders, it's a band riding around this machine trap of death that you have to launch bikes into their like thing to be able to damage them, and then they go into a damage amp phase, which everybody loves damage amp phases, so like that's cool. I don't know. I think that this boss is doing everything right that the first boss of the last raid did wrong. Like there's no intermission immunity phase. And the ads that you have to kill give you like a reasonable thing to do.
Yeah.
I don't know. This boss looks sick, and from what I hear, at least from Dratnos' video, it has a pretty sick respawn animation too. So
it seems really cool. I agree. It's like the perfect first boss. I'm surprised because like my prediction was that they would work the drive system into the raid somehow. And I mean, from these 7 bosses, they haven't. So unless Galliwick somehow uses drive, I don't think it's going to, but unless it somehow uses it, we won't have that in the system. But we kind of get like a light version of that with, you have to kill the bike ads, hop on the bike, and then drive it into to the boss. I think that's a really cool thing. Actually, this is one of the Mythic mechanics I do know, because on Mythic, when you kill the bike, it spawns 2 swirlies, or 2 soaks that 2 people have to soak in, and then they have to collect an item in that soak, and then basically you're refueling the bike. So like fuel jumps out of the bike, so both people have to catch the fuel, bring it back to the bike, which will refuel the bike and make it targetable. So then it can drive into the boss, which I think is just a really fun idea. It's gonna make it more hectic, but in the best way. I'm really, really, really into this. It looks like, and it's just a perfect tone setting for the raid too, right? Where you're just a perfect goblin raid where your mechanic is to smash bikes into a giant tank.
The other part about this too, I think that, and I'm ripping this straight from Dratnos' words. Like I said, it has a damage amp phase, not a damage immunity phase. Mm-hmm. And I think that is huge. Like that can literally make a fight super fun or annoying as fuck. Yeah. Like people hate the fact that they just have to stay in there and do nothing during immunity phases. And like, I get it for like flavor and everything. Sometimes it makes sense, but I feel like it's a little bit overused sometimes. And so I think having a damage amp on this boss is so much better than an immunity phase. Mm-hmm. So much better.
Yeah.
But it does look very easy. It's the standard, don't stand in shit, kill the ads, launch them into the boss, and then do your thing. Like, there's not a ton more mechanics than that. That's pretty much the entire fight.
Yep.
But the first boss, it should be easy.
Yeah.
So I think this is perfect.
I agree.
All right, Scott. I think I struggle on what boss I'm the most excited for, but this is one of the top two for sure. The Cauldron of Carnage, the King Kong versus Godzilla mechs. It's a council fight, so Scott probably hates it. If we're gonna call a 2-boss fight a council fight,
it's not a council fight. It's a 2-boss fight. That's not a council. Council is 3 or more.
The coolest part about this entire fight, not even talking about the mechanics, is you are fighting these two things that are also fighting each other. I think that's awesome. Like they are essentially, they're fighting you and then they take a break from fighting you to go fight each other and then they go fight you again. Like it's just awesome. And it has this very like anime style flare up clash in the middle of the arena whenever they're fighting each other. Mm-hmm. I don't know. A lot of it is just the flavor of this fight really does it for me. I think it's awesome.
Yeah.
It looks like there's some issues. Like for example, when I was watching Dratnos kill this, they were just standing in the pools on the ground. The tanks were. So it looks like there might be some tuning that needs to happen there. I think health also needs tuned a little bit. And that cast that they do in the middle where they fight each other, that's another damage increase. The bosses deal more damage after they do that. And then they keep doing that on a timer. So,
wow, it's almost like there's a trend here. Yeah. No, I think this fight's so cool. Like I one thing I really appreciate about it is, so I'm trying to think of the fight in God, the freaking second raid in Dragonflight. What was that called again?
Aberrus.
Thank you. That fight where you had to swap sides because you have a stacking debuff on you.
The amalgam boss.
Yeah. It has one of those effects, right? Like the longer you fight a boss, you get a stacking debuff on you that does more and more damage. But they've kind of built in the perfect, hey, you're supposed to switch now mechanic in, which is when they do the clash in the middle. That's when everyone's supposed to switch sides and switch to the other boss and start fighting that. So I like appreciate that from like avoiding clunkiness perspective, or the game telegraphs very clearly, like you have this thing on you, but here's exactly how you're supposed to handle it. And it seems very intuitive. And I like that.
Mm-hmm. The other thing about this is it is a 2-boss fight at which they don't share health.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously that means if one dies before the other one enrages. That's just how this always happens in WoW.
Yeah.
So these will need to die together, but you're going to have people on each side. They're going to be swapping sides. You're going to have to equal that out. But again, when they're in the middle, they are close enough to be cleaved. So you can cleave off the higher health mob, have everybody target the higher health mob, whatever you need to do to get these things back even. So I think you're going to avoid a lot of the clunkiness of these fights where you have to like make sure things die at the same time. It isn't going to be the council boss from Amir Drasil. over again, where you have like multiple things that you're needing to juggle and they all need to die at the same time and everything
Yeah.
like that.
Well,
And again, I don't think that that's a huge annoyance, but it is an annoyance.
the problem essentially solves itself, sort of, because like, let's say you divide your team in half, and Team A does more DPS than Team B, but like they're gonna constantly be switching, right? So like Team A gets boss A down to 80%, Team B only gets boss B down to 85%, then they swap and Team A does more damage. So in theory, they will catch up and
Hmm.
not perfectly equalize because it's based on timing and cooldowns and stuff like that, but like get close to equalizing in the end.
I
So
could just see a world at which you have the clash happens. So like every two clashes, you have people with cooldowns all on one side, but that's a raid leader issue. Like split your raid better.
yeah, yeah, but
So
I don't know. It doesn't completely solve itself, but I think it kind of sort of does. I also really like the mechanic where you can't move, and the more you move, you fill that bar up, and
hmm.
and if you move too much, you get stunned, and then of course the boss forces you to move. Like I think that's a fun mechanic.
I wish my hope and pray for this fight is that that mechanic teaches people how to like bait multiple swirlies on top of each other,
Hmm.
because I feel like I've seen so many people in this game who don't know that they can like bait swirlies on top of each other sometimes. And so this is like the perfect way to like enforce that into players.
Hmm.
I just don't know that it'll stick with the population
You
afterwards.
also stun people around you with that mechanic. So look forward to your friends fucking with you by running around and stunning you.
But at least you can easily tell if you're going to get stunned or not because they use the new animation
They
for the
do.
circle around
They
you.
do. It's really cool. What a fight. Love it. Also, objectively, the mecha T-Rex is like one of the coolest designs they've done. And the fact that you get that mount from the renown track, the raid renown
Mm.
track at the end of it is fucking great. I love it.
All right, Scott, we got to talk about the one boss that I had the most trepidation coming out of Dratnos's video about, and that's Rick Reverb. Um, and Dratnos's takeaway on this is they should probably go back to the drawing board on this boss because there's just too many mechanics, and they aren't like mechanics that play off of each other, and they're not necessarily mechanics that are fun either. So, again, I don't have a horse in this race currently. I haven't done any testing, but I will say he puts out these pylons that you have to like constantly drain to make sure that they're not going to get full charge and then explode and deal damage to your raid. Um, yeah, I don't know, but things like that where you can't determine at which area those are placed, I think are annoying, because now you're either having to have people sacrifice uptime or have it be only ranged and healers dealing with it. Uh, and it brings up another issue that during the intermission, the boss flies away from these things that you then have to soak, and now your disc priest and your holy paladin are ranged from the boss, and they can't do any healing during a huge healing portion of the fight. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I kind of share Dratnos' trepidation on this one. They might need to go back to the drawing board a little bit.
It just, especially if I think this is the third boss in the raid, it just seems like there's a lot going on for sure. Um, there's like, I think those pylons are an interesting idea. I don't know if you know the mythic mechanic, by the way.
Mm-mm.
So you have those pylons, except they all start with a shield on them that prevents them from being drained, and you have to have two players both get a mechanic and like touch their mechanics together under the pylon to break the shield. But there's like so many pylons, it's happening so fast. Like it just feels like it's a whole lot of stuff at the same
Mm-hmm.
time. And it just especially for like a third boss, this seems like a lot, but maybe I don't know. Um, I think it's like a lot of ad. Like I just feel like there's a lot of ad spawns too. I just feel like you're not going to
Yep.
get a lot of time on the boss, and it's going to be frustrating.
And the other thing about this boss is, like I said, you can't control where these pylons spawn.
Hmm.
Like I think a lot of this would get eased up if you could like bait
Bait
pylons
them,
to
yeah.
spawn in a specific location, because I think that that would solve a huge problem with the fight in that you could be out of range of even hitting the boss to go click one of these pylons, which means your healers could be out of range of healing your tanks, or your ranged DPS players, like they're ranged, but they still can't hit the boss because they're too far away. So like,
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's one of the major issues that I'm seeing with it. On top of, it seems like none of the mechanics really interact with each other too much based on what Dratnus was saying, which all of the other fights that we've talked about, the mechanics interact wonderfully together. Like they interweave to make like a cohesive fight. And yeah, the Rick Reverb fight doesn't really seem like it's doing that quite as well.
It also does like the Ansarek like jump over the wave thing on steroids. Like
Yeah.
it'll
So during
overcharge
the
the pylons and you need to stack on the exploding pylon.
yeah, that's during an intermission, which I don't know if he is immune. I think he takes like 99% reduced damage, so
Yeah.
it might as well be immunity. So yeah, that's the one good thing I will say about this is I like that they're bringing back the Ansarek bounce. I think that that was visually pleasing,
Mm-hmm.
um, and it is a mechanic that I think is cool. Like it's something that they can definitely continue to reuse, because it's been explain to us how we handle this mechanic and players are learning that, and so I think it's perfectly fine to reuse this.
Yeah, no, for sure. We'll see. We'll see
um
how much they make changes on this one. I agree with you. It like I love the idea of like a sound boss. I think that's
mhm.
cool. It just seems I don't know why there's like there's like fire swirlies too like it just like there's so
Yeah,
much going on here.
the I will say the animations for a lot of the ground effects in this boss are just like gray and dull.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that that might be something that is a work in progress, um, because a lot of the other things that happen in the raid are very well themed, and even if they're the wrong color, they at least like look right. They look like they belong. And these gray things on the ground, I don't know. It just seems like it's a placeholder. It's the best way I
It's
can put it.
sound, man. That's what sound looks like.
Sound is gray. You heard it
Mm-hmm.
today. um, but I don't have anything else about the raid. Like ultimately, I'm excited for this. Like even if it went live in the state that it is now, I'm very excited for this. Like not every raid can have every boss be good. There's always going to be a worse boss in every raid. So like even though we're talking down on a couple of these and we're a little bit concerned, I'm not that worried about the raid as a whole because of that. So I'm
No,
excited.
I think it looks so cool. I mean, the storyline is essentially we are not just taking down Gallywix, but we are essentially leading a rebellion against his leadership and like freeing the city, which is just great. It's really cool.
So the other thing that I wanted to say, Scott, is I haven't looked at how the raid's laid out yet, but are we like busting down the front doors and then climbing up towards Gallywix to like be this like ultimate like fight? Do you know?
So the raid takes place like in the city itself, not necessarily
Yeah.
in the Galagio. So the raid actually starts like basically the way that Undermine is laid out. There's the Incontinent Hotel, which is great, which is like our home base, and actually the raid is like right there. So like the hub that you're going to be hanging out with in all patch is like right next to the raid. Um,
Hmm.
and then you'll go around the city eventually leading up to the front door of the Galagio, and I think maybe the last 3 or 4 bosses are in there. So I'm not actually sure on the layout though. Like I don't think I don't think it's linear, um, but I'm not sure like which bosses are like you can choose
Options.
between bosses. I'm
Yeah.
not sure.
Or if it's like wings rather than just
Yeah,
like a choice between bosses. Yeah.
yeah,
I don't know. I'm excited. I'm trying to have tempered expectations. But from all the testing I've seen so far, people seem to be enjoying it, and I am kind of feeding off of their enjoyment to think that this is going to be a pretty good raid. So we'll see what happens. Um, Hopefully the race is good, uh, and we'll go from there.
yeah. Pretty
Anything
exciting.
else on the raid, Scott?
No, no. We talked about the renown track already. I just want to reiterate it's a really cool idea, and we'll see
Mhm.
how its implementation goes.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna have to revisit that and see like how everything happens
Yeah.
and when we're getting the dinars and everything.
I don't know if
But
you've looked into it at all, but there's some like really cool, like kind of game changing quality of life things in there. Like there's a self res that you can get
oh shit,
at one point. So you like no longer need a warlock with the soul stone. Um
damn.
yeah.
So it allows you to have white protection. I hope that's pretty early on.
I believe it's like week 4. So basically the way it works is there are, I believe, 25 tracks in this renowned. You will get 1 track per week. There will be
Mhm.
a catch up mechanic. They haven't specified exactly what it is yet, but like even if you're only killing half the bosses, you will get enough renowned to get one level of renowned a week. And so they've basically planned everything out. So like we do know that the first dinar will be, you'll get week 16 of the raid is when you'll get the first dinar. I think you get, the interesting one is like they've also baked the shortcut, the skip, into the renown system. I think you get that at week
Okay.
8 or 9. Um, but so it's the thing I'm interested in is things like quality of life changes, like the self res, like getting rid of um needing to have white protection and all this stuff that like is a staple in World of Warcraft, and people that have played other games have been calling for fixes forever. uh is like, okay, now we've added this, but we've time gated it, and like what are we going to do in the next raid, right? Like, are we going to have, is it just going to be from now on every raid has a renown track, and these quality of life things that we now expect because you brought them into the game are just going to be time gated randomly? Cuz like, I mean, one could make an argument that like you should just have a self res baked into the game. When you wipe, you should just pop up again and
Yeah.
go. um and if they're acknowledging that by giving you a self res at some point in this renown track, well then, okay, next patch you tested it out, in this track, but now gimme gimme now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because like
The
like let's be honest, you're 4 weeks into the raid. The people like us, we usually have AOTC by then and are kind of done with the raid.
mhm.
So
the the other thing that I think is like quality of life that they've toyed around with, but they haven't really expounded on, is these hearty feast things. Like
mhm,
the feast that you can put down and you get the buff for an hour, it persists through death. Um, they're extremely annoying to make, I will say. You need 10 feasts to make
yeah,
one hearty
and
feast.
they're soul bound,
Uh,
so you can't like just buy them.
so I would like to see that be in like the renown track, maybe. Like you reach a certain point to where now you don't have to eat every time you die or something like that. Um, honestly, food persisting through death would be kind of cool too, but I don't think that that'll ever happen. So, but no, I completely agree with you, Scott. I want them to use this as a system to test things that then might bring in as like base things later. Um, I think it's a good way to do it. I share the frustration that if you're doing it this way, then maybe why not just do it widely?
Yeah,
Like, why not just do it from the get go? But
yeah.
I don't know. I guess we'll see. Um, all right. Well, we don't have a ton more time, but I guess you want to chit chat a little bit more about the creator clash. There were a couple of funny moments
I think we
that I
should
want to
just
call out.
we should do drama time, because
Oh, okay.
the ending of this was controversial. Um,
Sure, sure.
so we talked at the very beginning of the episode about like how the point system works, but I don't think we went into a lot of detail. So essentially, how this thing is set up is, you get points for how long you survive, and you get points for kills, and all that stuff kind of adds together to get like your overall point number. Um, and then I think it's after the third game. Maybe I'm make maybe it's the fifth game. Like after the fifth game, like before the fifth game, no one can win the tournament, right? But after
Mhm.
the fifth game, the people with the top, if the people with the top 3 points scores win overall. Like they win the entire game. Like they're the last one standing. They win the tournament. If they don't, then we move to another game, and then I think it opens up to the top 10 teams' points. Anyone in the top 10 teams' points, if they win the game, they win the tournament. And that like is a really interesting thing, because what happens if you're in the top 3 and this is the you get to win game, everyone just like gangs up on you because obviously they don't want you to win. But essentially what happened was we kind of were down to like the I think there was the 6th or 7th game, so it was like when anyone in the top 10 could have won. Very contentious, very close, came down to the wire like these things always seem to. And someone was found a location that they could sit. So if people don't know how Planetary Storm works, it's like any other battle royale where like the storm slowly shrinks. Eventually the storm gets down to a size where it doesn't get any smaller. But what it does do is start spawning swirlies around. So the storm is not constant in this area, but you constantly have swirlies you have to dodge around on. Well, someone found a spot on a roof that there were no swirlies spawning on that roof, maybe because it was like too high on the z-axis or something. And they just kind of hung out there the whole time, Gingy, and won the game.
Yep. No fighting in the final 2.
Yeah. And so the complaint here is that Pika and Zaryu were like running away with the game. Like from a points perspective, they were absolutely dominating. They were most kills. They were in like the top 3 almost every single time. Like they were completely dominating the game. Like we talked about at the very beginning, if this was a game decided on points and points alone, you probably would have known by like match 3 who the winner was going to be, because they got this lead, and like it's insurmountable lead essentially. And they didn't win. Right. And the reason they didn't win is because they were like, I think they were the last ones on the board fighting Gingy's team. I think it was just Gingy. I think his teammate was dead. They were the last ones there fighting them, and he was up on this spot and they weren't. And so people are really mad about it.
Well, they weren't last, but they were very close to being last. Okay. It was Mez and Gingy were the last 2 alive.
Okay.
But Zaryu died not too long before everything hit the shit show. So in the last game, it was hilarious. It's one of the things I wanted to call out. Peekaboo was talking hot shit because he was like off on the side and nobody could see him, but then he got jumped from behind in the storm by Guzu and Savix. And Guzu and Savix essentially just like one-shot him. And he was like, I'm fucking dead. And then after the game, he was laughing about it. And he's like, dude, Savix owes me $50,000. So I think it was all fun and games for Pika and Zar. But yeah, so they were, I think, in the top like 4 or something at the end. But yeah, Gingy found a spot at the top of a roof that essentially cheesed out the final guy. But all in all, like, I don't know, Gingy and exploits are things that kind of go hand in hand at this point.
Sure.
And I think that this is one of the least like egregious things that he's done. Like,
yeah,
I think that this is in the spirit of it, right? So
I do think it's funny. I was listening to people talk about this, and they're saying like he should have jumped down and 1v1 to the guy, and I was like, why? He's gonna win. What do you mean? He should like the proper thing to do would have been to fight him honorably in a 1v. No, he wants to win the game, so he's gonna do what he needs to do to win. Yeah, I mean, look, here's the thing: is like we talked about at the beginning. This is an ad. This is a commercial for World of Warcraft. That's all it is. And so like all it needs to do is be entertaining. It doesn't really need to be fair. Like it just doesn't. It's not fair. Like there are players that are so much better at this aspect of the game. There's players that I think this time around they actually did people that like play World of Warcraft. Like the first Creator Royale, they just like had people that don't even play WoW. They're just like, yeah, get in there. This one, it was actually people that play WoW, but like obviously huge skill discrepancy. Like Peekaboo and Zaryu both like play a lot of PvP, And so like it's not surprising that they were like very good at the PvP aspect of this game. Um, so like it just wasn't fair, and that's, but like it doesn't have to be, like that,
Yeah.
like it's supposed to just be this fun thing, and that's what it was. And so like if we're talking about the future of Plunderstorm as an esport, I would think, yeah, we got to figure some shit out about this, because I don't think it worked. But
Yeah.
we're talking about Plunderstorm as um, like a fun like creator activity that they're gonna do once a year. I think it was great.
I want to say that one thing that I did find very funny, uh, the main broadcast for this had like 12,000 views or something, 12,000 viewers when I went in to watch it near the
Mm-hmm.
end. Pika and Zaryu had a combined total of like 52,000
Oh yeah,
viewers.
like the two,
It was
and that's why
hilarious.
everyone wanted them to win, and that's why they were mad because these were the guys they were watching the most, and they wanted them to win, and I get that, totally get it.
It is
But
very hard to follow this, though. Like, that is one thing I hope that they kind of maybe try to improve if they want people to watch it. Because, like, watching the main broadcast, it jumps between shit so fast that, like, if you're following one team, it's really hard to do that. So, essentially, what you have to end up doing is, like, pulling up that that team's stream on one monitor if you have two monitors, and then have the main broadcast on the other. So that way you can kind of get like an overview of the entire game, but also
mm-hmm.
get that team's view. And it's kind of, I mean, it's kind of like what you do for the Race of World First, but yeah, I don't know. That just, it's kind of hard to follow. But again,
Yeah,
if it's a once a year thing that they do for fun and it's just to promote WoW, does it matter?
no, it does not.
So, but Scott, I do have one other question that is going to bring into the drama time a little bit more. I
Okay.
want to know who's tanking and healing for Echo in this Race of World First. Is
That's
it
a
gonna be
good
a
question.
one person fight for first in this race?
No, because Method's gonna swoop in and take second place. I don't know. I mean, it is really interesting. Obviously Echo had a lot of they had some of the controversies that lost their healer at the beginning of last race, and excuse me, they have I don't even know what their roster looks like right now. I do know from everything I've heard, Echo is taking this race very seriously. They do not like to lose, and they do not want to lose again. And
Mhm.
so they're going to do whatever they can to prevent that from happening. So I'm not saying it's not going to be competitive, but yeah, it is interesting watching like some of the core members of this team leave for one reason or another. And
Yeah, I mean, they lost a healer initially,
yeah, but
and then
everyone knows healers don't matter, right? So
they lost a tank as well, right around the same time.
mhm.
And then they had a previous Race to World First tank step in and tank for that person.
Can
But
pretty
I
much
don't know if they're
guarantee he's
coming.
not going to be doing that this time.
Yeah, he definitely will not be filling in again. But I don't know if the initial tank is coming back or not. So like I'm left here wondering like who is going to tank for this team that has tanked for them before. Like
Yeah.
they might just have to get somebody new, which is a detriment when it comes to the veterancy of or the power of veterancy for Race to World First.
I mean, there's always team changes in between seasons. Like they recruit new people, some people drop out. Like this happens for sure. But yeah, I don't know. Like it's interesting because Echo's domination in the MDI is essentially over. Because I don't even think they're hosting a team this time around for the TGP. For
Mm-hmm.
other complicated reasons we don't have to get into. But I don't think that's happening. So um and part of that is because they're taking Race to World First really seriously, and it's happening at the same time. That's, by the way, when we talked about the raid, the one thing we didn't talk about is the testing schedule, which has been very aggressive.
Yeah,
They basically tested all 7 mythic bosses in 2 days last week, which was a lot over a very short amount of time. So I think the guilds that do this as their job and spend a lot of time preparing for those tests, getting as much footage as possible from those tests, and then pour over that footage after those tests have been very, very, very busy these past week or so. So,
Yeah.
I don't know why they've done the schedule like that. It doesn't feel like this is a shorter PTR cycle than has existed in the past. Like we still don't have a release date for this season. I think we're still thinking beginning of March, probably most likely. But interesting choice of theirs. I don't know.
Yeah, the raid testing is weird. Like they had an hour per boss, and I I don't know how much you can actually see mechanics and understand what's really going on and what the vision is in an hour truly, because like it's going to take you 10 to 15 minutes of going over the dungeon journal or pulling the boss to learn what you even need to do. So that only gives you 45 minutes of actually testing, but then you also need to survive to later points of the fight. And so, let's say you get 30 minutes specifically of testing out each mechanic and how they interact with each other if everything's working correctly. um yeah, I don't know. It might be a little too low for testing, but I also
Yeah.
get like they don't want guilds to figure out everything or figure out their strat for this boss before the game even comes out.
Yeah.
Like I get why they limit it. It's just I don't know if it's quite enough time.
So they are doing more mythic testing this weekend. So I don't know if that's because they like took that the results back and they're like doing major overhauls of some of the things, but Mythic Rick Reverb, Muggsy, and Cauldron of Carnage they will be doing this Thursday.
Okay. Well, those were some of the ones that Dratnus was saying were a little bit overtuned too. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess we'll see how it plays out. It's hard to really have a huge opinion on this until we know
Yeah.
it's good or bad, right?
I want to point out that part of the weirdness of this is also that like they've had some really serious PTR issues that they haven't been able to resolve. Like the Mythic Plus testing schedule, we talked about that a couple weeks ago. They've basically never hit the mark with any of that because it's supposed to be Tuesday through Tuesday testing, and the PTR with the new dungeons have never come out on Tuesday. I think it's been Thursday every single time, and late Thursday. So it's essentially like turned into just weekend testing, which wasn't part of the plan originally.
Yeah.
So they've been struggling a little bit here. And I mean, I'm not sure why exactly, but
Mhm. I do, fingers crossed, hope that the things that we're seeing are getting ironed out now and will not be problems in life.
I hope so too.
They've had some rough, rocky releases of shit lately. I think Siren Isles actually released in an alright sense. Um, but they have had quite a few rocky releases lately. So I hope that they shore everything up before it actually comes to live servers.
I agree.
Well, I think we're about at time, Scott. So is there anything else before we wrap this up that you want to touch on?
No, I don't think so. I think this was a good episode. Lots to talk about. Fun
It
stuff for
was.
all.
Well, guys, all of that fun stuff, all of it is coming soon.
Soon?
Early March. That's
Yeah.
what we're gonna say. I forget what date we said, so I'm not gonna say a date, but early March.
March
uh,
4th. No, wait.
um, was it March 4th? I thought we
March
did.
4th. Yeah.
All right, March 4th. If that wasn't what we said before, that's what we're saying now. But all of that, I want to know which specific changes you guys are most looking forward to this season. One thing we didn't talk about, and maybe we'll talk about it a little bit more next week, is there's a whole slew of class changes, and even if it's just aesthetics that are changing, there's a ton of them. There's a lot of things that they are doing to make abilities line up for when like their damage happens, changing ability looks, as well as actually changing how classes are functioning and everything like that. So I want to know which specific changes you guys are most looking forward to this season, if it's the raid or if it class changes or some of the Mythic Plus changes that they've announced. Let us know. Contact us as always over at yellingintothevoidwow@gmail.com. YouTube is at Yelling Into the Void Wow, and Twitter is at Into the Void Wow.
And if you are not already subscribed to this podcast, we encourage you to please do so. You don't want to miss any part of season 2. This raid is going to be awesome, and we're going to be there covering it the entire time. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and pretty much anywhere else in the world that podcasts exist.
And lastly, please consider liking and subscribing, commenting on the YouTube video. All of this helps us get more exposure and get introduced to new people. So if you like what we do here, that's the best way to support us over on YouTube. But guys, until next week, we'll just be over here yelling into the wood.